Here we go. Buddy, I am here with my lifelong buddy and favorite teacher, thought partner, Laura Estes-Swilley, and we are answering big questions. So today, the thing that we're talking about is why are teachers quitting? And I'm thinking, Laura, for so long, we were worried about beginning teachers quitting because in years 1 through 5, we were losing a lot. And so we put in mentoring and all of these supports for new teachers. But lately, the attrition is some of our most effective, experienced teachers like you, like 2 decades in, loving kids, loving your content, and still considering going. So I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to ask you in Florida right now, still in the pandemic with the Delta variant, how are you doing?
I'm doing. Things are hard here for so many reasons. But I have always been the teacher who says I'm not going to care about what's going on outside my door. I can close my door, and this is us. It's harder this year because even though this is us and our door is closed, the kids are bringing in so much discord. Like here, of course, like everywhere, the masks are a big problem, and we have a mask mandate in our county, but it's not enforceable. It is completely unenforceable by order of our superintendent. And so there has been a lot of mask angst in our school. So for me, it's just another distraction. It's just another thing to take their minds away from where I want them, which is just here. Like I'm not trying to have them come in at any crazy level, just be here and be present so we can do some things together. And it's harder and harder every day to bring them together.
I think, when we think about our own resilience and sense of efficacy, all of us through COVID have lost a bit of resilience and efficacy. And so even things that may not have been hard before feel heavy now.
Yeah. Yes. And starting the school year was the heaviest lift I've probably ever done. And I would imagine, because there's still schools that are just getting started in our country, that everyone is experiencing a power lift because it's not easy after so long, many of these kids not having school at all. Like they were at home, but that's completely different and way more casual. The pressures are coming back for them. The pressures are coming back for us. And we all thought, and so many people have said this to me recently, we all thought this was going to be a better year. And it's turned out to be a worse year because for us, because and you mentioned Delta variant, it's kicking our ass down here. And it's a much more difficult year. And I don't think anyone probably across the entire country was expecting that.
Do you think it's harder because we had that little window in the summer where we thought we were coming out of it? And we really did. We all thought this next year is going to be so much easier, is going to be so great to get back. Do you think the fact that we thought it was going to get better makes it even harder?
Yeah, it's like, to use an analogy you and I can both relate to, when you're on a diet and you're fine, it's going great. And then you go off the diet, like getting back on it is so much harder. And it's the same thing. We had a break, we traveled, we got together in groups, people like went places without masks. We thought our vaccinations were like what we needed, and then something new, which is just a little variant of the old thing, has hit us hard, and it's really hard to go back to some of the restrictions that we were so excited to shake off.
Yeah. And we know like COVID, it is a heavy time. But do you think, I mean, how much do you think COVID has exacerbated this teacher attrition? Like were teachers thinking of leaving? Were they struggling before COVID and this has just made it worse?
Yes. Yes. Even before COVID, I didn't have a good friend who was a teacher who didn't talk about leaving before COVID. So I can't say all teachers because I'm talking about like my inner circle of teachers. I didn't know anyone who wasn't keeping an eye out or an ear to the ground. And then COVID, of course, has exacerbated it. Even people who aren't in my inner circle are telling me about their job searches. So yes, but I don't know that that's the case everywhere. I can really very easily speak on Florida, and Florida has been difficult. And my county has been terribly difficult. And we went through a superintendent change as COVID was coming. And not just superintendent has changed, but everything has changed in the wake of that. And so I don't think it's that, like you're talking about the more seasoned teachers, and I don't think it's that we're change. Like we want to try the new things. Like, yeah, give me something new. I can't wait to try it and see how it works and make it mine. But I can't take all the change all at once on top of going through all of the personal things we've been going through with COVID, and then the professional things that we're going through with COVID as well.
Yeah. I talk to my students about the two types of commitment for teachers. So there's this organizational commitment, which is how committed are we to staying at our school and our district? And often reasons that teachers leave a school or district is because of leadership. Like you said, a new superintendent that wreaks some havoc, or a principal who's either not competent or not supportive enough. But then there's professional commitment, which is us choosing to leave the profession altogether. And lately I'm hearing, we've always heard teachers transferring schools, moving to a different district. But lately I'm hearing more of this loss of professional commitment where I just can't, after, for some of us, like for you and me, decades, can't continue on in this profession. So I'm wondering, like, what do you think the root of that change in our feelings about professional commitment is?
Julie, when half the people you meet every day think you're an idiot or don't respect what you're doing, it's hard to feel empowered to do what you need to do. It's hard to follow your dream and your love. And so, nobody loves teaching more than I do. And nobody loves like getting into a piece of literature with high schoolers more than I do. And I know that sounds awful to some people, but it's like amazing. But there isn't much respect for us as a group. And I think it's very hard for people who have worked 10, 15, 20 years like us to continue to feel like we're doing something important and good when we don't have the respect of our society at large.
So, like, do you feel disrespected by your students? I can't imagine that you do.
So I have this really strange community. You know how odd this community is. And I don't say odd in a bad way. It's just a really unusual mix of suburban and rural, and then a little bit of like changing demographic that even is a little more urban, because certain parts of our area are not just suburbs anymore. And so we have a weird mix. And so kids aren't coming to school already respecting the teacher anymore. And I'm sure there are places where they are. And I'm sure, I know that there are places where there's even less respect than in my school. But of course, yeah, there is less respect for a teacher, from kid to adult, all the way.
I think that, like, where is that coming from? I know that's been shifting for a while, but it just seems more pronounced now. Like, what is behind that?
Do you think is it the division in our society, like politics? Could that be it?
I think that could be it, and clearly we have right now politicians who, I mean, education has always been a tool for politicians. If we think back to the 80s and a nation at risk, because fear motivates people to vote in certain ways, and so does hope, but fear is easier.
Yeah.
So if we can, like in the 80s, in a nation at risk, we stoked this fear that we were vulnerable because we had this, if not mediocre, failing education system. And we know the data that report was based on is a lie. That if we dig a little deeper in the data and look at subgroups and look at the Sandia report, it was all based on a lie, but that lie continued. And that narrative continued through when we started teaching in the 90s. But now it's just so ugly. And it's these accusations that we're trying to, I don't know, brainwash kids or make them adopt our own values. It's just crazy things. It's crazy things. And I guess that still comes from politics. Media fear sells. Those sensational stories about schools always will get people to tune in.
Yes.
But it's got to be more than that. Like it's almost just a lack of respect, human to human anyway, and a lack of respect for anyone who's in any kind of public service work.
True. And anyone who is kind of like, in a way, holding themselves as an authority figure. Mm-hmm. And it's professionally, we are authority figures, at least in my little classroom or in my hallway. I'm an authority figure in that building. And then, so you're talking about public servants, and basically most public service roles are working as as authority figures. And so that could be it. I think though, like I was thinking while you were talking, like even when we were kids, I remember hearing the little pithy phrase, if you can do and if you can't teach. I remember hearing that, and I don't even know how I heard it or in what context I heard it. But until like that's the 70s. And then if you go all the way back to the beginning of public education, we know that it started to like partially indoctrinate citizens. We want to have an educated populace. We want people to know our pledges and our history and the things we want them to know. And so when you go to a public school, if you have like a base distrust of government, we're an extension of the government. I mean, I teach the curriculum they allow me to teach. So, which is kind of crazy if you think I'm trying to teach your kids my ideas, because these are not my ideas. So I think that's been for a long time a growing distrust of government and education as a piece of government.
Yeah. And you and I grew up, with my mom being a teacher. And so I certainly remember some of those feelings and some of that frustration from her. So it's been there. I just don't know that we felt it quite as intensely. Social media doesn't help. There wasn't social media then, so people couldn't put out some of those sort of disrespectful, hateful things. But I'm also thinking, like, along with that, if we're talking about politics and lack of respect for professionalism, comes this control. And I was telling my daughter, of course, Laura teaches third grade. And when I taught second and third grade, there was so much autonomy. Like we could do these themes, we could read aloud to kids, we could do projects. There was so much. Of course, we had standards and common assessments, but there was some freedom in the curriculum. And now everything is so tightly managed, and there's such a control from the state level to the district, and in some schools from administration, because of this fear. And I'm not sure where that comes from, but that has to play a part in the satisfaction you have, especially someone as creative as you in teaching.
Yes. And I think some of that fear, that hyper control, comes from something as simple as school grades. They are just trying to control it So with what they've already been told is the right way to do it. The people who are saying this is the right way to do it aren't necessarily the ones who know that. They're just ones who've been told that. So for me, I've been super lucky because I've gotten to teach advanced placement for 15 years, a little more than 15 years, and there is still autonomy there. College Board, which is the owner of advanced placement, has tried to tighten that up a bit. There is less autonomy, but I still can be my creative self. And we also here in Hillsborough County had the curriculum that was prescribed, and even in the English classes all the way to senior year. And nope, you're not allowed to teach this because you have to teach that kind of thing. And I don't know, I didn't chafe under that as much as I thought I would, because I think you can still be creative in the way you teach this, even though you can't teach that. You can do it your way. In my world, I think it's a lot different in the elementary world where you kind of have to do things in a certain way. But if you're differentiating for your kids, you have to be creative. You can't teach in one rote way ever in any class, in any school, on any day.
That's true. I'm thinking about some of these micromanaging actions at the school level. So you and I, you had a student in high school that I had in grad school, terrific teacher. I think she'd probably been teaching about 12 years, and she quit and started working for a tech company. And I had a long conversation with her about why she quit. And she said, there was a series of things, like for all of us, things build up. But this one particular day, and she had some really needy students at a school in the middle of an economically unstable neighborhood. But she was making such gains. And she said the principal walked through a really rough morning, and the objectives she had on the board was not the one on the curriculum calendar for that day. And that was the only feedback and interaction she had. So she said that was the day I decided. And really, I decided because I felt like I was being managed and not developed by this principal as a teacher. And that always stuck with me. And so I don't know if in high school, it's probably a little different because the principal certainly doesn't have deep knowledge of the subjects that all of you teach. But I'm wondering if you feel the same kind of micromanaging issues.
You know me, and it's going to be really hard to micromanage me. Just that's just so I might feel the tiniest bit managed, but not like what some of my peers feel, and not like what some of my peer teachers in other areas or in other grade levels feel. I feel like, and this is one of the wonderful things I can say about teaching right now. I feel like my building respects that I'm a professional and that I know what I'm doing. And they may not understand what I'm doing, but they know there's a reason. So they might ask me. And of course there is a reason, and I can tell them. And I don't know if some of that is because I'm teaching in this special little enclave of a corner of the world, or also that I've been in the same school for 22 years and they know what they know about me.
Yeah.
So I don't feel super micromanaged. I don't love having for me, the micromanagement comes in with the PLCs and the meetings and the, fill out this form and fill out that form. But as far as my teaching, I feel like they know I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's okay. So that's lucky.
It's lucky. And it seems like rare in some places. So we talked about the level of disrespect towards our whole profession, the lack of autonomy, plus all the COVID weight and issues. what else are there other things we need to think about in terms of really effective, experienced teachers deciding to do something else?
So I think honestly, like for me, the biggest thing is the thing that is most often overlooked in any plan for back to school, and that's the culture of the school.
Mm.
Building school culture, building a positive school culture, a culture that cares about all members from bottom to the top. I think that that is a huge factor. And that comes down to leadership, right? And we know that people don't really leave jobs, they leave bosses for the most part. And so I know that the micromanaging is part of school culture, like that we were in a way talking about culture, but culture is so much bigger than that. And I think that that is one of the things that is driving people to want to be away. Gosh, teaching is so solitary and it is so hard, so hard. Something has to be good and light. And you just named all the things that aren't. And so the only thing that can be is that culture. And it's so more important than ever. And trust me, I know how exhausted administrators are. We think our backs are breaking. I don't know how strong their backs are that they're still like it. But if with all of the things pulling them, to me, that's the one that should be grounding them, because it is what everyone in that building needs.
And I say to my students, culture is really built on our collective beliefs. So what do we believe about kids? Are they essentially good? You know, that forms our discipline plan and the way we interact with them. What do we believe about learning? What do we believe about teaching? What do we believe about the way colleagues should interact or how much we should collaborate? And as leaders, what do we believe about our teachers? Because all of that manifests in culture and in our actions and interactions. So I think it's a time maybe now where we have to dig down together and say, what is it we really believe and value? Because otherwise, we're just going through motions and none of that will stick. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. But who in the world is having those conversations? Because you didn't say as a principal, you said we, and that means all of us. When are we having those conversations? How are we having those conversations? Everyone is treading water every day. I said to my niece, who is a student at my school, today we were just talking about school with my father. She hadn't seen him for a while. And I said, well, don't you think everyone in our school is just exhausted, except one person? Like I named one administrator. And she said,
say, like, why is that one not? There's probably a lot to unpack there. You don't have to answer that.
Well, no. And honestly, I think it was just my perception of her. This administrator is like so energetic and always engaging, always on. And I said, so I don't know why, but it seems like all of us are exhausted except her. And my niece said, no, she is too.
She's a duck on the water, right?
Right. We're under. She's on top. And so, but even from the perception of a student, and of course, she has her own, I mean, Sophie would have a perspective that is very like through an educator's eyes because she spends a lot of time with me. But even she as a student was able to say, oh, no. She's not okay either. Everyone is exhausted. So yes, what you're talking about is beautiful and wonderful. And 10 years ago, maybe was happening in some places, but I don't know how that is possibly happening anywhere. So maybe that's part of the problem.
Maybe that's it. I mean, but then again, if we're going to make room for those conversations, that means something else has to come off the plate, because there's only, like you're saying, the plate's already piled really high. So if we're going to hold space to really examine our shared beliefs, what are we going to give up? so that we have the space to do that? I don't know right now. If I ruled the world, I can tell you what I would have us give up. I mean,
Testing, Julie?
that might be one. Ding, ding. Because the foundation's cracking of that culture unless we can have those conversations, and unless we can really dive into and get information from kids about our culture, because our actions are where they're interpreting our culture. Right. Not the beautiful banners, not the things we say to them. Like, they're watching how we act and how we interact. And that's what is culture. It's all those observable, very subtle things. And I'm thinking even of schools, and I talk about Stowers Elementary, because in terms of culture, like, that's been my beacon for so long. It's a school with a beautiful culture that was very intentionally created. And I know my friends there, even as tight as they are struggling under the weight, like you said, they're in your district, of all the change and all the COVID and their population. So it's all the things that are just so hard.
I think here's the other thing that a lot of teachers don't understand, and very definitely no teacher probably in their first 10 years understands it. And maybe I understand it better because you have been an assistant principal and a principal. And I have another very close friend who is an assistant principal in a high school. So it's very similar, like, stuff coming down the pike. Yeah. We think of the principal as being in charge, of being the leader, and what they really are, and I don't mean to be offensive when I say this, but I've come to really view the principal as a middle management.
They totally are. And the pressure is like from above and below. Yeah, absolutely.
And so the more we say, yes, we need that unified vision, we need this time with the faculty and the staff together. Where do we find that time? It doesn't matter if the upper echelon isn't supporting that, because the upper echelon, I believe in my district, is telling schools what their culture needs to be, period. As if you can order a culture, as if you can.
From the outside,
Yes.
That's crazy. And, if we talk about Stowers and we talk about Missy Leonard, who's dynamic principal, who I have heard say many times, I wish I could put a bubble over my school.
Yes. That's the equivalent of me closing the door. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So given all of this, and the limitations of our power, because I think the feeling of powerlessness certainly plays into this for all of us, even for people like me who, are now doing research and teaching grad students and supporting what's happening in schools. What can we do? And by we, I mean all of us, those of us in schools, those of us who are parents and people who support ed. Certainly collectively we have some power. So what is it we should be thinking about doing?
There are so many things. And I think if you look at all of those stakeholders you just mentioned, everyone has a different role and a different thing they should be doing. I think what families need to do is start actually and actively supporting their community schools and their students' teachers. You don't always have to agree with the books we're reading. I'm saying the books I'm reading in my classroom, or this specific lesson I'm teaching, or a standard or whatever. But you kind of have to support it, because I'm a professional. I didn't pull it out of nowhere. I didn't just feel like doing something today. And you have to trust, because you are involved with your school and the players in your school, then you can trust them. But you can't build that trust from sitting at home or on the internet. You have to engage. And so I think that's their role. I think within the school, so I might say something controversial, and I don't know if this fits with what you're teaching in your grad classes, but I have yet to attend a purposeful PLC meeting.
Mm.
And I don't know, how long have we been doing them in Hillsborough County? 10 years?
Wow.
All the iterations we've had of them have all turned into, well, what are you working on? And we're all working toward this, and we're going to do this common assessment. Does anyone have any questions? How many books do you need? Right? Like informational, not what they were actually designed to be, which was research-based, digging in and figuring out how to help our students with what we're struggling.
Yeah.
So let's stop wasting time on those and do something important, like working together as a staff, building that culture. So that's where the time could come from for me, because I have stopped fighting against testing because I know testing isn't going anywhere. But this is a waste of time. I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't hurt anybody's feelings, but it's a waste of time, and it could be used in a much more productive way.
Yeah. And I think what happened, because I remember when the DeFores rolled out their work on PLCs, there was a very clear why. You know, there was for them a deep justification of the work and a lot of guidance in having those conversations. And now we sort of pay lip service to all of that, and we've lost the intention. We've lost the why of that work. I think we've lost a why for a lot. Like, if there's not a clear, compelling why, let's take all the stuff that doesn't have a clear, compelling why off. Let's lose all that junk. Like, if there's not if you as a leader can't communicate a clear and compelling why for something, let's just stop doing that thing. You know, that business of just doing it because that's what we've done, or that's what I think we're supposed to do.
But it's also, Julie, that doing it because that's what we've been told to do. Right. And that's where the middle management comes in. I don't think my principal is like, well, we've always done PLCs, let's keep doing them. I don't think that's it. And I don't think also he's like, I've seen some powerful stuff coming out of those PLCs, because he hasn't. Right. I think it's, well, my boss says we're doing PLCs and we're doing them this many times a month, and so that's what we're doing. And which, by the way, we've changed our name. It's no longer a PLC. It's an AIM, which is, I guess, is it academic impact meeting? Maybe something like that. I don't really.
That's what we do when something's not working. We just change the name. We change the name of it, and then we bring in a new consultant.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
Oh, so.
And I think I want to go back to your question, your question that also involves, like, you in higher ed, what can you guys do? And one of the things I loved about college was I wasn't learning, and I know this is a complaint that people have about people who go to college, so let me preface. I wasn't learning about the real world. I was learning about how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so that kind of stinks, because then you like dive into the real classroom and you're like, what? This is not it. But I think keep doing that, because we need visionaries. We need people who want to create the environment with the bubble over it. And the place those ideas are born is in higher ed. And so as you're turning out engaged and excited APs and principals and PhD students who are going to go on to do more research, like, let them have that sort of Pollyanna view, because then they can hone what's really important.
Yeah.
Maybe they can become our decision makers.
Yeah. Well, if you need someone to traffic in idealism, you picked the right girl.
Exactly.
For that one.
Exactly.
And I think for us as researchers, because most of us, at least in big universities, you know, have two roles. We teach, but we also do research. If we can make that applicable, and we can really look at why teachers are leaving, I think should be a major focus of every College of Ed. If we can really start to like turn over some of this and look at some things and make some recommendations and talk to teachers and spend our time in schools, maybe we can shed a little light and help people advocate as well. So I'm hearing # support teachers, Hashtag trust teachers.
Yes.
Hashtag thank teachers, because I think that is an untapped place. You know, the very least we can do is appreciate the work that you guys do, and how much of your lives is given for this profession that you've chosen.
So I was thinking about you yesterday. I got a phone call from actually a woman we grew up with who teaches at my school. She has been in and out of the classroom role and is transitioning back into the classroom for the first time in a little while. And you know what being a first year teacher is like. And so she called me yesterday evening and she said, Laura, I need you to tell me what makes a good teacher. What is a good teacher and how do I know I'm doing it? And I thought about you.
And how much time do you have?
but right. And I thought, well, if you asked this number of people, you might get like a binder and all of this information. And I thought that's not what she needs. Like, number one, she needs some nurture because she's freaking out, man. But number two, she needs the truth. And so I told her the truth. And I told her, like, one, you have to care about these kids. You have to love them in the most teacherly way you can. Mm-hmm. Number two, you need to know what they need to know. Mm-hmm. So do the standards matter? Absolutely. You need to know what they need to know to get where they want to go.
Right.
And number three, you have to bring lots of opportunities for them to learn those things. That's it. That's it.
That's so good.
Thank you. And so then I was thinking of you, like, why does it have to be so complicated? Why can't we trust teachers to do those three things every single day and know that they're going to be effective?
And, you know, for me, like, it's simple, but it's not easy. And the deeper I get in, sometimes the more complicated it is. And I had this conversation, you know, I constantly talk to people about what makes a good teacher. But this notion of approaching things with curiosity instead of judgment has been on my mind, because the best teachers I know, like you, who graciously has these conversations with me, are really curious about kids, about their work, about themselves, about their content. And they sort of push aside this quick judgment and kind of roll into that question space. You know, why is this kid responding this way? Why is this the best way to teach this? Why didn't this work? You know, that kind of approach. Yeah.
Right. But we don't, I hate to say this, I'm not seeing in my students. And so this is a great time to have this conversation because I've only known them a month. And they don't totally get my vibe yet, because it is apparently a vibe they've never had. And they don't get what you just said. I want to understand how they think and how their minds work and like the path it takes to get there. And so when I push them a little bit with something as simple as, why? Tell me why. They're like, okay, that was the wrong answer. She wants to know why. I'm wrong. And they're always searching for the right answer. I know some of that, we've taught them that through testing. Mm-hmm. But I am still slowly teaching a lot of my students that I'm going to keep pushing you, and it's okay to have your own process. And we don't, education as a whole, I think, doesn't believe that.
Yeah. And the beauty of just Ted Lasso. Do you watch Ted Lasso?
No.
On Apple TV? Gosh, I'm not always a big TV watcher, and somehow I got a free subscription to Apple TV and started watching Ted Lasso. But that is his approach, and what he advocates is curiosity over judgment. He gives a whole speech about that. You should watch it, by the way. You would love it. But I've really been thinking about that in terms of kind of the framework from which I view teaching is this sort of open-minded, passionately curious thing. And maybe that would help revive us a bit if we just could come from that stance. So maybe it's people having space to have conversations like this, because every time you and I talk about teaching, I get more excited about teaching.
Me too.
So maybe this is what one of the things teachers need is just a space to talk about their work and what it means and what it is and why it's important and why they're struggling and what, why some things are working. Maybe that's a space that we need to open up. Maybe that, and instead of aim, what could we call that? Teachers,
Um,
teachers asking questions, tax, I don't know.
Not tacky.
Tacky.
No. So I agree. We have though become so conditioned, just like the kids. If we're together, there must be a very concrete purpose, and lesson planning or the calendar agendas are going to come into play.
An exit slip.
Yeah. Jeez, an exit slip. So it's a paradigm that kind of shifted without us realizing it.
Yeah.
And I think when you're talking about the 20-year veterans, yesterday I walked into school and had not yesterday, it was not yet, the other day, 3 different conversations with long-term teachers who were telling me about how they have been looking for other jobs. And it's not the job we signed up for anymore. It's not the job we started doing anymore. And this little insidious paradigm shift happened right under our noses.
Yeah.
And I don't think the next shift or shift back to something is going to happen so easily.
I think that's true. Especially now. Now we're holding steady as a victory in some ways right now. Oh, but we will keep.
Well, right now, it's all about just to get the kids back in the building.
Yeah,
in most different places.
Literally survive right now.
Right. So if you think about Maslow's, I've been teaching my AP students Maslow's to do character analysis and investigation. Like, where are they? What do they need? How can they grow to actualization? If you think about Maslow's, where as a whole, not here, because we've been in school since last year. We didn't do that. But as a country, we're pretty low on the hierarchy of needs. We're in safety. We're just trying to be safe. And so what education is asking of us, which is everything in between and self-actualization into these great teachers, we're still largely in safety and security. And so what we want from ourselves and are expecting from ourselves is really not completely available. And so then we go home every day feeling like we failed.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is to fail those kids, to let them down. Yep.
That's true. So maybe we give ourselves some grace right now, and we allow ourselves to dream and envision a better future for our profession, and continue to hope and not fear. And I'll do a little part, to for us, people like me. I live in a community that has a school, to reach out to that school and say, what do you need? How can I support you? To reach out to my teacher friends, for me to continue to tell the stories that show the impact that teachers have. So I think maybe we all just have to do our little part where we can with what we have, and not lose hope, because it does feel sort of avalanche-y when you look at teacher attrition and you look at some of the things that are happening in schools.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you give me hope.
Thank you. You always give me hope and stories to inspire me.
All right. So I'm going to click off our record and say bye to all of our educator friends who are watching. And we wish you some hope, and, start having conversations with your colleagues and dreaming again, because it's going to get better, and we're all going to do our part to make it better. And thank you for what you do for kids, for all of us every day. looking on my record.